Hello students. So today we will discuss a very important topic, and the topic is structural approach. As we know, as we understand, there are various types of approaches of teaching English. Okay, so among those approaches, structural approach is one of the best. So in this video, we are going to discuss certain points. The points we are going to discuss today are structural approach, principles of selection, characteristics of structural approach, merits, and lastly, we will discuss its demerits. So before starting the video, it's a humble request to everybody to be very attentive. So let's start the video. So we'll discuss structural approach. Okay, so we must understand what is the meaning of structural approach. In the slide, I have already mentioned certain points. So just have a look. What is the first point? Structural approach is also called structural oral situational approach. Now the question is why this approach is known as structural oral situational approach, because this approach focuses basically on the oral aspect. Getting the point? The speaking skill, and apart from this, it also highlights what the situational aspect of teaching a particular language. In a sense, we can say if you are asked to teach your students the language English or any other language with the help of structural approach, then you will have to create a situation, okay, so that the learners get motivated and encouraged to learn something. So this is the reason this structural approach is called what? Structural oral situational approach. So this is all about the first point. What is the second point? The second point is it is a scientific study of the fundamental structures of English language, their analysis and logical arrangement. Okay, that means when as a teacher you are going to work on the language that you are going to teach, specifically the English language, then you will have to go through a scientific study. What type of study it is? It is a study of the fundamental structures of English language. So we understand language has a particular structure. Language has a particular fundamental structure. So in structural approach, what you should do, you should make a scientific study. Okay, what is the structure? Okay, what is the, in a sense we can say, pattern? Okay, all these things you will have to analyze in a very logical manner. For example, we have the structure of making a sentence: subject plus verb plus object. Getting the point? So why we are having this order? Why a verb comes after the subject? Why object comes after the verb? So you will have to analyze it scientifically. So it comes under the structural approach. Getting the point? So this is the second point. What is the second point? Structural approach is a scientific study of the fundamental structures of English language, their analysis and logical arrangement. Getting the point? And within bracket I have mentioned selection and gradation. That means to make a sentence, okay, to create a structure of a sentence, you will have to select the words, okay, appropriately, and after that you will have to go through the process of gradation. So this is all about the structural approach. Okay, I hope you understood. Now we'll proceed to the next slide. In this slide, we are going to discuss about the principles of selection. What are the principles of selection? Just have a look. The principles are usefulness, simplicity, teachability, productivity, area of differences, and lastly what? Language habits. So let us discuss one by one. What is the very first point? Usefulness. That means as a teacher, when you are going to work on the selection of the structures of a sentence, then you will have to make sure that that particular structure should be useful. Okay, if that is not useful, it is not effective. So usefulness is also, in a sense we can say, one of the principles of what? Selection. What is the second point? Simplicity. You will have to create the structures in such a way so that everyone can understand. Okay, it should be simple, it should be easy to understand. So this is all about the second principle of selection. What is the third one? teachability. You will have to create certain structures in front of your students, certain forms of sentences in front of your students that they can understand it easily. You can teach it easily. So teachability is also one of the principles of selection. What is the next point? Productivity. So it should be productive, it must be productive. The structure that you are going to work on with your students and the structure you are going to introduce, okay, to your students, that should be productive. So that is why we can say productivity is also one of the principle of what? Selection. What is the next one? Area of differences. As a teacher, you will have to put concentration on this particular point also, because when you change the word in a sentence, then the meaning also gets changed. Getting the point? So this is the region that you will have to work on, area of differences also. For example, if I say a sentence, he does the work every day, so it is assertive sentence. But if I say, does he do the work every day? Getting the point? That means I am starting the second sentence with what? The verb. Okay, that is why it becomes a question. So this is a simple example that we can analyze the concept of what? Area of differences. So this area of differences is also, in a sense, we can say it as a principle of selection. What is the last point? Language habits. That means habit formation. So as a teacher, when you are going to teach language to your students, then you will have to put concentration. You will have to focus on that particular point, that the students are able to make habits or not. Okay, this habit formation is also, in a sense, we can say one of the principles of selection. They will have to create habit. They will have to create situations by themselves so that they can learn a language habitually. So these are all about the principles of what? Selection. Now we will proceed to the next slide. In this slide, we are going to discuss the characteristics of structural approach. Just have a look. What are the characteristics? Number one, stress on oral approach. Structural approach always, in a sense, we can say focuses on oral approach. Okay, oral means hearing something. Okay, it means the listening skill, and oral means what? The speaking skill. That means structural approach all the time, in a sense, we can say emphasizes on listening as well as speaking skill. Okay, and what is the second characteristics of structural approach? Oral drill plays a significant role. That means speaking. Okay, the practice of speaking the language, okay, it also plays a significant role in what? In terms of what? Structural approach. This is all about the second characteristics. What is the third one? It correlates teaching of grammar and composition with reading lesion. So structural approach all the time, in a sense, we can say it correlates two things. What are the two things? Teaching of grammar and composition and reading a lesson. When the students are expected to read a lesson, okay, simultaneously what happened? It is being correlated with the teaching of grammar and composition also. So this is also one of the characteristics of structural approach. Okay, what is the last one? It involves selection and gradation of materials. So I have already mentioned that selecting the words and to grade them, okay, and in a sense we can say display them in an appropriate way. This is also one of the characteristics of structural approach. If you are not able to display, or if you are not able to form the words or put the words in a proper order, then you will never get the meaning of the sentences. That is why this selection and gradation is very important, okay, regarding structural approach. So this is all about the characteristics of structural approach. I hope you understood. Now we'll proceed to the next slide. So in this slide, we are going to discuss the merits. Okay, what are the merits of structural approach? Just have a look. The first merit of structural approach is habit formation is stressed. Getting the point? Structural approach all the time put emphasis on what? Habit formation. So to learn a language, habit formation is very important. If the student is not habitual, okay, then that student will never be able to speak the language properly, okay, read the language properly, write the language properly. So he will have to make habit formation. So the good news is that in structural approach, what happened? Habit formation is stress. So this is one of the merits of structural approach. What is the second point? Speech is emphasized. So here speaking, okay, speech, that particular ability is being highlighted. So this is also one of the merits of structural approach. What is the next point? Careful selection and gradation of structure. So in structural approach, okay, selection and gradation is a very important phenomena. And while selecting the words, while grading the words, while in a sense we can say displaying the words or ordering the words in a proper format, uh, the teacher, okay, is expected to be very careful in terms of what structural approach. That is why it is also one of the merits of this approach. What approach it is? Structural approach. Careful selection and creation of structures. Okay. Now what is the next point? Language is taught in meaningful situation. So as I have already told you that this is also called situational approach. Why? Because in a classroom the teacher is expected to create a situation to teach something. Okay, whatever he is going to teach, he will have to create what? Situations. That is why it is called situational approach, and this is a merit of structural approach, that language is taught in meaningful situation. Okay, what is the next point? It creates interest and motivation. So now, as a teacher, when you are going to teach your students different structures of the language, specifically the English language, when they will get to know different structures differently, then definitely what will happen? They will be interested and they will be motivated, because they will get uh, certain things which are new to them. Okay, that is the thing. We can say structural approach creates interest and motivation specifically for the students community. These are all about the merits of structural approach. Okay, I hope you understood. Now we'll proceed to the next slide. So in this slide we are going to discuss the demerits of the disadvantages of structural approach. Okay, what is the first disadvantage or the demerit of structural approach? It is not suitable for higher classes. Okay, why it is not suitable for higher classes? Because the students from the higher classes, they already understand, okay, the structures, how to make a sentence. That is why it becomes uninteresting. If you are going to teach them the structures of sentence, it becomes boring and monotonous for them. That is why from that particular point of view, we can say it is not suitable for higher classes. Okay, what is the second point? Knowledge of grammar cannot be obtained through this approach. Why knowledge of grammar cannot be obtained through this approach? Because this approach only concentrates on the structure of the language. Okay, grammar in a sense we can say is not being highlighted too much, and from that particular point of view we can say it is a demerit. What is the demerit? Knowledge of grammar cannot be obtained properly through this approach. Okay, what is the next point and the last one? Textbooks prescribed in course cannot be taught through this approach. Why? Because all of the time this approach concentrates on the structure of the language. Getting the point? The other things, the other aspects are, in a sense we can say, are not given much more importance. The grammar part, the composition part, etc., these are, in a sense we can say, are not given much more importance. So from that point of view we can say it is a very important demerit. What is the demerit? Here, textbooks prescribed in course cannot be taught through this approach. Okay, each and every aspects are not highlighted, okay, under structural approach. Okay, so these are all about the demerits of structural approach. Okay, I hope you understood. Thank you. Keep learning.